being recorded at RMLD's office, 230 Ash Street, Reading, Mass. For distribution to the community television stations in Reading, North Reading, Wilmington, and Linfield, as well as live streamed on RCTV and YouTube. The RMLD Board of Commissioners recognizes the importance of hearing public comment at the discretion of the chair on items on the official agenda. Once recognized by the chair, all persons addressing the board shall state their name and address prior to speaking. It is the role of the chair to maintain order in all public comment or ensuing discussion. Vice Chair Pacino will serve as the board secretary for this evening's meeting. Initially, we were going to go into executive session, but due to unforeseen scheduling conflicts, tonight's executive session will be postponed to a future date to be determined. I was hoping that all commissioners could participate at this point on a mutually convenient date as soon as possible. Okay.
Yep.
So
good.
let's, Erica, would, I guess I'll ask
Bob about any other date that would work.
Yeah.
The option is that we can do the executive session and that conversation at the December meeting, or we can try to find a time that works between now and then.
I'd like to find it between now and then.
Yeah, so when I
Initially, just a, because a 6:30 to 7:30 slot is my suggestion, as early as next Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday.
What I can do is I can propose Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in an email to everyone, and then we can confirm it if you want.
Yeah.
Or I can try to text Bob, but I know he's pretty tied up right now.
All right, because Bob isn't able to participate tonight, so just so John and Dave can hear it, that's going to be emailed by Erica a few options for next week.
Okay.
6:30 or 7:30?
6:30 to 7:30 is what I was thinking, early-ish, okay? We have a representative tonight from the CAB, Ken Welter from Linfield, and he's new this year, so I think this is your first time representing by yourself?
No,
Or
second.
Second, okay. From the CAB, do you have any comments for tonight?
I have none, no.
Okay. We have one liaison present. Two, Joe Carnahan. Would you two please introduce yourselves?
Certainly. I'm Joe Carnahan, one of the liaisons to RMLD.
Thanks, Joe.
We're getting some.
Joe McDonough.
Joe McDonough from FinCom also. Thank you.
We're getting some. Erica, we're getting some other noise coming through on this speaker. It's asking somebody to hold. It's also talking about the online.
Maybe an online participant is unmuted and they could mute. Not sure.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
Do either liaisons?
I don't know if it's me causing that. I mean, is
No, I
it
think
me?
you're good, Dave.
I think you're okay.
Can you hear me?
Now.
Yeah,
Yes, we
hear
can.
you. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that it's me. I'm just on my smartphone. I'm sorry, I can't be there tonight.
That's okay. It was a
Verified.
one of those voice recordings we were listening to. Do either of the liaisons have a comment for tonight? Okay. And lastly, for public comment, if there's any remote participants, please identify yourselves. I don't see any up on the screen. And Vice Chair Pacino does have a comment.
Yeah, I just want to recognize, a couple weeks ago, a former commissioner here, Jim O'Leary, who passed away. He served from 1987 to 2022. I served with Jim when I was on the Finance Committee. I also served with him on this board, too. He was one of the members of the board, the 5 members that were called the Dream Team, because each member brought a different skill to the table. We had an engineer, we had Jim who did computers, myself in the accounting. We had 2 others who were very much involved, actually individuals actually in the industry. And we had somebody who was an expert on rates. So he was a member of kind of the Dream Team. So I just want to, express our condolences to the O'Leary family. His wife actually works here as an employee, on that. So I just want to express the board's condolences to the family on this and to recognize him upon his passing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing his service. Moving along, we have approval of meeting minutes. do any, did any?
Move that the Board of
yeah.
Commissioners approve the minutes of May 3rd, 2022, and May 23, 2022 meetings on the recommendation of the General Manager.
Do we have a second? I'll second it. Okay. All those in favor of approving those minutes?
Ms. Pacino, aye?
Mr. Talbot, aye.
Marlene Abita, yes.
John,
If you didn't hear me, yes, for me too.
Yeah, no, we heard you fine, Dave. Is John
Okay,
there?
great.
We lose John?
He's here, he's just not here.
Well, oh, it looks like he,
I don't see him.
John,
I think somebody needs to hang up that line. I think there was an effort earlier to connect us by phone.
I'm afraid, I think you're right, but I'm afraid to hit a button and disconnect all of you.
No, no, but hang up the phone.
I think it's John's.
I'm on by Zoom. I don't know if anybody else is on by phone. I don't think anybody is, so.
The technical assistant, Tyler, thinks that it might be John's line. So we'll keep working on that, trying to connect him with that. Well, 3 commissioners have approved the minutes, and we'll say 2 have abstained because we don't have votes from them.
Yeah.
So that's fine. That's 3 is fine. So the motion carries. Tonight we have Julie Blackley here, our communications director, and she has an update.
Okay, sorry, can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so this month, some exciting things happened. The first being that we debuted our newly redesigned newsletter, and we made it just more professional and more clean. And speaking of the newsletter, we had a chance to look at some of the analytics, and we have 19,000 residential subscribers and a 55% open rate, which is well above the 36% industry average. And for our business subscribers, we have approximately 1,200 and an open rate of 39%. So we just felt, given our high readership rate, that our old newsletter seemed not worthy of our subscribers, which is why we redesigned it. And next, we have some media coverage from the previous month of Greg's becoming the general manager. So that was in all the local publications and also the APPA newsletter, as well as a podcast. Moving on to social media, we're continuing to see steady organic growth. Our reach is up 237% over the previous month, and we've been using Facebook to announce some program updates, and also our most viewed post was a post that said we were hiring, which drew 122 clicks, which hopefully is helping us with recruitment, and it's an additional vehicle to raise awareness of our open positions. And next, we have a joint initiative that we just did with the Reading Fire Department, because the winter is a common time for electrical and fire hazards. So we did a joint press release as well as 2 infographics about holiday electrical decoration safety as well as space heater safety. So those just went out at the beginning of the week. And this came about because I was at a meeting with one of the Reading Fire Department chiefs, and he said that we used to do a lot together and was looking for ways to collaborate, and I came up with this idea. So hopefully this can be the first of many, and it can be something that we can pilot for additional towns as well. And next, we also are launching our customer survey, which we do every few years. So it was just awarded to Great Blue Research, who conducted the last survey. So we are having a kickoff call with them next week, and we're going to get that out in early 2023. So first we're going to do the residential, then we'll do commercial. So we're excited about that. And lastly, we now have a Spanish translation on our website. So there's a button to translate our website in Spanish, and when you click that, there's also a drop down for any language you want. So it just shows that we are now accessible to people who speak different languages, which we think is great. Multilingual, exactly.
Well done.
Well done.
Yeah. Okay. Did you say that newsletter will go out in the next paper bill if we receive those, or it's only available online?
We just send them out online.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that is some.
First update just
Yep.
last week. The first
Yes, and
update.
the new newsletter went out.
New
Yes,
format.
the new format went out last week. So we're on the 20th of the month.
All right. And you have the new calendar?
Anyone out there?
Yep. Oh, and the new Reading historical calendar, which is also available, that people are very excited about. So, yeah.
Thank you. We always use the calendar. John, can you hear us okay?
John, are you there?
Was there?
He was there. He said, anyone out there? Okay. All right. Well, we're going to move along to the general manager report from Gregory Phipps, our new general manager.
Good afternoon and welcome. One additional comment, just following up on the communication. So one of the things that we're in the process of doing right now is looking at a variety of ways to improve communication to our customers in particular. And one of the things that Julie and the team have been looking at is the opportunity to, or the need to update our website, focusing on the digital customer experience. This came out of work that we've been doing already relative to the mobile app. We've learned a lot of new things, and we in fact just had a conversation earlier this afternoon, but a lot of good advice from others experienced in the IOU territory that are pretty advanced in terms of their digital infrastructure. The idea is both a combination of education, but also linking our website into our systems here. For example, new customers, when they come on board, they can do all the stuff digitally. Right now, we collect it, and then we create an email, and it gets inserted by hand. So we're going to try and update that.
Erica, I don't know if you're there, but no, I haven't heard anyone.
We can hear you now.
We can hear you.
It'll be
hear
important-
us?
be
But he
important that
can't
he
hear
hears,
us.
yeah.
Oh, there you are. Now I can hear you.
Very
Hear
good.
us all?
We did take a vote to approve minutes. We just recorded you as abstaining.
Right, do you want
Okay,
to say
fine.
you're in favor? We can still record you as being in favor
Of the minutes.
of the minutes. Are you there, John?
That's fine.
Continue, Greg.
think
Thank you.
Great. So anyways, this theme of communication you'll see come up more and more going forward. Key thing for us is personnel and human resources, so quick updates. One of the things that we're trying to do is encourage the individuals within the organization to be in the right place. And I say the right place, the right job, well-trained, et cetera. As part of that, we've done 5 internal promotions here in the past 2 months. We had an all-hands meeting on Tuesday, that was just yesterday, wasn't it? Where we recognize those individuals. There's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement amongst them, but the rest of the organization. We've done 2 new hires in the month of November, including we did a fair amount of interviewing, and we extended an offer out to a woman who is going to join us as the director of HR, starting just before the end of the year, so between Christmas and New Year. We're excited about that, very excited about that. We still have, we're working on the director of IRD. We're focused on, we've got 2 candidates, but 1 in particular, and 15 other positions, so trying to get them on board as well. So a lot of recruiting and training, so that's particularly good news. Wanted to report that we did issue and complete the first, what I call the first, we plan to do this on a quarterly basis, but the first of these quarterly employee surveys. We worked pretty diligently. We got input from several commissioners in terms of the questions. Also received input in terms of anonymous versus non-anonymous after, or anonymous versus not signed. We ended up doing it digitally. All said and done, I'll call 3.5 questions. So 3 questions, 1 half question. They are focused primarily on what things that we should continue doing at RMLD, but more importantly, what things we should change. So it was meant to be input. After a lot of thought and research, we ended up asking people to actually put their name with it. I know that's a little unusual, but you will be surprised that out of the 72 employees, 67 people responded. So I put that in the category. Now, there is caveats to that. I committed to them that I would be the only one reading them, my eyes only, and I will live up to that promise. And that what the intention behind it was to take the key themes, develop responses to them, not answer each one individual, but take the key threads and the key things, and I'm starting to digest all of that. And then over the next month and a half, make recommendations and get additional input in terms of how to make changes. And then we'll do it again next quarter. But that 67, that is a significant, that is massive. And I think it's an indication of the mood and the trust and the change that is starting to develop within the organization. Some of the key things that came in, so there was a comment in terms of the appreciation for the all-hands meeting, trying to get everybody together again. COVID partially took that out of the mix, but we're post-COVID. There was a recognition that communication has improved, but more communication. And then it is one key thing that came up over and over again. And then there were a lot of more specific suggestions as well in terms of recommendations. So I feel actually very encouraged by the response back from the first employee survey. So more work to be done on that, but the fact that with the request for people to put their name next to it, and we got such a significant response, I think is pretty encouraging. So those are personnel HR related stuff, and I think that's indicative of the fact that we've talked before about, this is the new RMLD. I mean, we're in a transition. There's always a transition when you get new leadership in place. There's the external world that's changing around us very quickly. So all those come together. I'm feeling very encouraged. We already talked about the customer survey. That's next. We've talked briefly in the past about new customers coming in. Interesting, there's actually some discussions with 2 new apartment buildings coming into the territory. It'll add somewhere between again, early discussions, but 500 to maybe 1,000 new residential customers, which is not insignificant when our current residential customer meter count is about 26,000. Yeah, go ahead.
And by territory, you mean Reading or
Reading.
the other 3 towns? Okay.
And primarily not in Reading itself, but at the RMLD territory.
That's what I meant. Okay.
Yep.
I thought so.
The other thing we've talked about before, but we are still actively engaged, and we have actually a commitment, so we're working on a contract, but we are talking to 5 new industrial customers. As we talked before, that could add potentially up to 80 megawatts of new load by 2025. That is not insignificant. Now, the reality is it'll probably be closer to 20 megawatts, but even 20 megawatt load addition after a decade of flat load is significant, where our average, if we look at an average load over the course of 87, over a typical year, is about 100 megawatts. That's pretty significant. So we're pretty encouraged by that, and it's also indicative, one of the key comments that have come back, and we've talked about this before, part of it is that it's the difference. These are manufacturing companies that use significant amount of energy, but part of it is the fact that our rates, relatively speaking, are low, but also the fact that we are nimble and accommodating and trying to encourage those new customers to come in. So we continue to make progress. We're in the process of doing an agreement with 1 new customer up in the Wilmington area, not on Ballard Vale, but in that Ballard Vale area. So that's good news. Those load growths are prompting us to continue to build out our infrastructure. So as we've reported before, and probably in the January or maybe February meeting, I'll have our director of E&O give an update in terms of the new Wilmington substation. We are on schedule. We're in the process of doing permits. We've got ISO New England interconnect studies already in place. We've got most of the permits in process right now. In fact, next week there's another presentation that we will end up doing to the Wilmington Planning Board. But anyways, the point being is that things are progressing on schedule for the new substation, which is even more, it was required before all of this new interest, but it's even more critical now when we actually might design the substation to have more capacity than we had originally intended. Associated with that is, and this new load is not just concentrated in one part of Wilmington, but it's spread throughout Wilmington primarily, and also North Reading is another expansion in North Reading. That has prompted the engineering team to rethink the design of our network expansions. So as Mead had kind of walked, as the director of E&O had walked through at the budget presentation, there's more than a 6-year plan, but there's a 6-year budget plan in terms of key network additions. So they're looking at that. Those were primarily 13.8 kV. So 13.8 kV is the voltage of our distribution network. Given these loads that are coming in, we're actually, the team is looking at adding to or modifying that to be a 34.5. So 34.5 kV ring, ring literally, combination of increasing the reliability but also being able to handle the load. So anyways, there's a lot of work that the engineering team is working through right now, which is good. And the existing 13.8 kV network that we currently have will tie into that 34.5. Again, I'll let Hamid in the next few months, our director of E&O, kind of give a quick update in terms of what that will look like. But that's good news. Obviously, all of these investments require cash. Question? No, I'm sorry.
No.
Yep, no, I'm sorry. So, and one of the things our new director of finance has already hit the ground running in terms of pursuing in coordination with the town of Reading in terms of some administrative stuff to get us reinstituted on the SAM network. But basically, we've already got several of these existing projects are queued up for proper submissions in January and also in March, so that we're actually in queue for a lot of these federal and state grant funds that are available. So the reason I mentioned that last piece is the combination of the team is moving quickly, and also we understand the importance from the ratepayers' perspective that as we invest in the network to handle electrification, that where we can do customer funding from the ratepayer perspective, but more importantly, grant funding. We're pursuing that aggressively, and I've already hit the ground running. So that's very, very good news. Those are the key pieces, I think, for today's update. I guess the last piece of update, we will talk about 2023 rate discussion in the next meeting, but our intention is not to do any rate changes until March 1st of 2023.
Okay.
We, at that point in time, you remember from the budget, next year the budget is estimated to be just under $110 million. This year, we are, at the end of November, we are right around $92 million, which was the original budget. We have one more month to go. It's roughly going to be, it's estimated to be about an $8 million, again, it's tied to usage. It's going to be probably an $8 million month, so we will be right around $100 million as we've come to the end of 2022. A lot of that increase was tied to the increase of energy costs that started, as you guys remember, back in February and March of this year, tied to international events. And one of the things we've talked about before is we are directly, particularly in New England, but we in the U.S. are directly affected by what happens worldwide. And I guess I'll say one other item because it was requested from one of the CAB members. But there is, and we will at the appropriate time issue more clear. Well, we've issued talking points actually to our customer service people. But there, like last year, there is a concern about winter reliability. And when we talk about winter reliability, in New England, about half of our energy use is generated by natural gas. And when we get into winter months, natural gas is also a primary source of heating for residences and building. There is potential scenarios like last year, which didn't occur, and for that matter, nothing in the past 12 years, where ISO New England would request load reduction, and that load reduction could potentially ultimately come in the form of rolling blackouts. Now, the intention here is not to create any doom and gloom, but we're very aware of the situation. We are, the forecast right now is that the forecast for January and February is not forecasted to be particularly cold. If we end up in a situation on a regional basis where we have 4 or 5 or 6 days of particularly cold weather, less than 10 degrees, then the supply of natural gas that would normally go to generation would be prioritized to residences for heating. And the oil reserves that are typically the backup are relatively low. Last year at this time, they were roughly around 52%. This year, the inventory is around 42%. That's up from August when they were around 38%. So while there's concern, et cetera, if something has to happen, there'll be plenty of warning. It won't be a sudden surprise. If it does, the procedures that we have in place, and we practice. So we review our procedures in the springtime and in the fall of every year with ISO New England. But if they do a load reduction, it could potentially impact our customers, and it would be basically a rolling 2-hour. It'd be 2 hours spread throughout, so not to exceed 2 hours, and it would spread across the entire base. I say that from the perspective, we've got a few calls that have come in because the news are interested in interesting news. That came up. It's been a topic of conversation amongst the MLPs and the IOUs all year, and it was last year as well. So it's not necessarily new, but the inventories are a little bit lower this year than they were last year. So it's something that we keep an eye on, and if there's more stuff to talk about, we will talk about that. But I just want to give a heads up that we are very cognizant of it. We have a procedure and plan in place. But we
fast
are
forwarding to, if we were to have the conversation, then how much notice would there be before
Yeah.
this?
So
6 months, 2 weeks, 1 day?
Oh, no, yeah, I think in terms of the notice, it would be a couple of days, a day or a couple of days of notice. Like if ISO New England were to call it, there would be 1 or 2 days of notice of when it would be coming. But you would have a better sense ahead of time in terms of when they actually would make the request. But you would have a better sense that we've got a cold snap that's going to last 3 or 4 days, or 4 or 5 days. But the weather in New England, while it changes a lot, having an extended cold period is something that wouldn't happen by surprise. We'd know it a week in advance or 5 days in advance. And we'd do a lot of communication outbound if needed. Now, we don't expect it.
Question?
Yes, sir.
Do you have like a rank order system in terms of who would experience the blackouts? I mean, I'm thinking places like hospitals, for example, and or
Yeah.
places like analog devices, which can't, they can't go down in power.
Yeah, so there are certain ones that have to be guaranteed power, barring a whole regional blackout. But yeah, so there is a procedure in place identifying the sequence, et cetera, and those that would not lose power at all. That policy we've never used. I shouldn't say never. We haven't used it in the past 10 years, but again, we review it under the guidance of ISO New England every spring and every fall. So we went through it back in a couple months back. So there is a procedure and process in place. I mentioned this not to cause concern or alarm, but just to let the audience know that we are aware and we're vigilant and we're
I think that's great. That's very appropriate, obviously. So
Yeah.
thank you.
they're very good.
Yeah, a couple of questions.
Yeah, please.
I'm in the peak production program. Is this going to be part of that? If this comes along, can you send out something in advance to tell people to cut back on their usage?
So that's one of the things we will probably do something along those lines, using the peak. So that's part of the reason why the customer notification system and the email communication. One of the things that we request when we sign people up is to have the ability to text them, and that has to be an opt-in program. So one of the things that both in part of the communication from the website, but also for any emergency communication, and we use Twitter as well. So there's different mechanisms that we'll use to give people the heads up that that you should reduce load, and if you don't reduce enough load, then we'll have to do rolling blackouts. So there's all that part of the communication piece, but yeah, we'll use everything we have if we need to. Now, we need to be a little more, so we know the sequence. One thing we do need to update is the communication mechanism that we'd use and how we'd lay that out.
Okay. The other question I had is to back up on one of your other items. When you talked about the additional load coming in from
Yeah.
all these, is that going to affect tax base for the towns?
Yeah, so in terms of tax base, yes, as these new businesses come in, so they by themselves will create additional tax revenue for the towns. They'll create additional jobs within the towns. Some, and again, these particular jobs, some of them will be actually from individuals within the territories, within the 4 towns. So from an economic development tax base basis, new load coming into it, new customers, new companies coming into it is actually a good thing. And in the case of the residential pieces, that's also a good thing because that's an additional part of tax revenue base and people spending more money within the towns themselves. So growth is a good thing it's a great point to bring up, Commissioner, that it's a good thing overall, not just for RMLD, but for the towns in which we operate.
Very good.
Thanks. Are we moving on to APPA legislation?
Yes.
Okay, you ready? I'll make the motion. Move
Oh,
it.
right.
Well, we'll let him describe it first, right?
Give us a setup.
Yep.
Well, okay, yeah, I guess we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
My apologies, I just noticed, but when this printed, it only printed, is it, oh yeah, the second half.
Let me bring up that.
Yeah, see if you can bring that up. So relative to legislative participation, one of the things that we are up. So I guess at the end of the day, regulatory and legislative activities have a direct impact on how all utilities within not only state of Massachusetts, but also on a federal level operate. We as a municipal light plant within Massachusetts have a fair, we come under the jurisdiction of the DPU. Where there's policies in place that we have to follow. But as we had talked about more than a year ago, the 2021 climate bill, known as S9, had a lot of implications and impact. It helped us mold what became our Policy 30, of which we are adhering to. Each year, the APPA, which is the American Public Power Association, in late February, early March, does a legislative emphasis down in Washington, D.C. on a national basis. And we, as RMLD, through NEPA, which is the New England Public Power Association, have participated. And we intend to participate again. The request is to participate again this year. On this slide, okay, it did come up, great. So on this slide that's on the displayed right now, and in the lower left-hand corner, there's more details at the publicpower.org policy positions website. So APPA is pretty good in terms of documenting the variety of topics which they are legislating for. While we are a member of APPA, we're currently a smaller voice as RMLD, but through NEPA, for example, we as NEPA have presence and are on the board of directors of the APPA, so we do have ability to influence. One of the requests that we will talk about probably in the January meeting, and we've talked about a little bit in the past 2 meetings, is what legislative items do we want to promote at the federal level and also at the state level. And we talked briefly about some of those. Some of them were load sharing of data that allow us to basically manage our peak a little bit better. Load sharing of data with the IOUs was one piece. We talked briefly about workforce development at the state level to encourage more employees that are familiar with technologies that enable electrification. Air source heat pump, for example, is one key piece. There are nearly 24 items that...
Question?
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. I've seen the list there, and I think it's the same list. There was one called bond sequestration. I didn't understand that one. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I didn't. So I looked at it very quickly, but it was tied to the some of the funds that go back to 2010 that are still 2028 and 2010 some of the funds that were available on a federal level. I didn't get into any more detail than that, but the APA wanted to make sure that those funds remained available amongst all of the changes of the past two administrations. On that, there's more detail, Commissioner, on the publicpower.org. Each one of these has a nice 2-page summary that includes the APPA position in terms of what they're doing. There's several of them. So that's one interesting one. Each one of these is each one of these is related to us in one way or another. Good. So the request tonight is to allow the general manager, that would be me, in the end of March, February, to have travel authorization to participate. There'll be more details in terms of soliciting input from the commissioners in terms of key topics. Those topics are actually organized with the other general managers in NEPA, so we actually go down as part of the NEPA group. The way it is structured and the way it's been structured in the past is that the individual general managers tend to be meeting with the senators and House representatives that are in their area, but to push and to encourage the adoption of topics that are more regional as well as federal. So there's more details to come, but we want to take the opportunity now to do the requirement to do authorization for travel for the general manager to request that authorization for travel.
Is there any further discussion
You ready for the motion?
from the commissioners?
You ready for the motion?
Yeah, we'll read the motion.
Okay.
Thank
Move
you.
that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve Gregory Phipps travel to and attendance at the APPA Legislative Rally in Washington, D.C. from Monday, February the 27th, 2023 to Wednesday, March 1st, 2023.
Yeah, I'll second that. Okay.
3 seconds.
Yeah. So any further discussion, I was asking?
See none?
No?
Thanks for
Okay.
the explanation, Greg. Look forward to more information. Thank you for unpacking some of those topics. We appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you. And we'll look for more input later.
Okay. All those in favor?
Mr. Pacino, aye?
Marlena Beda, yes. It's 4 yeses, Erica. Motion carries. Have fun, Greg. Okay, we're at the second to last part of our meeting. It's policy review. Greg, are you going to present
Yep,
some
I'll
changes?
walk you through each one of these. So at each meeting, one of the primary responsibilities of the commissioners is to provide guidance via policies, and so we have several. There are 3 we're going to talk about tonight. One is fraud, policy 10. Policy 20 is the FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, and then the last one, policy 26, is CDL, alcohol and drug testing. The first one we got to spend a moment on. The first one is a new policy, right? So the context of this, there was some earlier discussion on one of the last spring at one of the commission meetings, and the request and the reason for this, or the underlying background of this particular policy, is that there is a fraud memo that goes back to 2010 that has served as RMLD fraud policy. But in the recent years, as part of the financial audit, the auditors had requested that we put in place some more formal policy as RMLD relative to fraud. And so we took the notes from the discussion, we took the notes we started with the fraud memo itself, took the notes from the discussion back in the springtime, and drafted, tried to keep it as tight as possible, yet serve the purpose of putting a fraud policy in place for the employees, the leadership, the commissioners, and, as is typical, companies, subcontractors, et cetera, that interact with RMLD. So it is in one sense in terms of the scope broad, but in terms of the coverage, it is basically set up that when you look in your fraud book on the draft of on page 39 of 84, but it talks about the definition. The fraud prevention policy is applicable to any or all acts or omissions that can constitute suspected fraudulent activity. That includes, and it goes through a list. So it goes, that definition of fraud, we spent quite a bit of time working through that definition. You would think that that'd be a pretty straightforward thing to do, but in fact it is not. So we got internal opinion and legal opinion in terms of structuring this one, and had legal review of it as well. And then it went through the other 2.5 pages are tied to the responsibilities. One of the requests that had come through in the spring meeting was to make sure that in this fraud we still made provisions for whistleblower protection, which we did. That's in section 8 of it. So hopefully you guys had a chance to take a look at it, but it is, it will be, if it's approved today, it will be the first version or Rev 0 of a new policy 10 fraud prevention. So any questions or discussion on the new fraud policy?
No, I read it, but I didn't have any questions.
Yeah, this one took some time to put together, so very good. So if you want to,
You want to do the motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. Move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve Policy 10, Fraud Revision 0, as presented on the recommendation of General Manager.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you, John. Any further discussion? That's probably a no. All those in favor?
Ms. Pacino, aye?
Talbot, aye. Mr. Stembeck, aye.
Marlena Beatty, yes. Passes 4-0. Erica. Thanks, Greg.
okay, thank you. Policy 20 is the family medical,
Greg, if I may,
Yes.
I had, as I
Oh,
mentioned earlier,
yes, sir.
Prior to the meeting, I do have to leave for another commitment. So I just wanted to say I wanted to thank the board for being so flexible in this regard. So thank you very much, but I'm going to have to sign off right now.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
The second policy to review and approve tonight is Policy 20, which is the family and medical leave. I think it worked out pretty well with each one of these, where we do this summary page in terms of what it is and the major changes. It was basically, at the end of the day, it was updated to reflect recent changes at the state and federal level relative to parental leave, family medical, FMLA, and Massachusetts law. So it was mainly clarifying. It didn't change anything contextual. It just basically brought it up to be more consistent with current law, and to allow that as those law changes, we didn't have to go back and make incremental edits to it. So there was a broadening, like for example in section 1B, FMLA and Massachusetts law was added to clarify the prevailing laws and regulations used to interpret and implement Policy 20. That's an example of trying to make it more broad.
Okay.
So there's not really, the changes are fairly insignificant. They're more administrative. It's an important policy to put in place, and it also keeps us in compliance with both state and federal family medical leave legislation.
Will you read the motion?
Okay. Move that the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve Policy 20, Family Medical Leave Act, Revision 4, as presented on the recommendation of General Manager.
Second? Any further discussion?
Second?
Okay.
Second?
Dave? Yeah. All right. All those in favor?
Ms. Pacino, aye?
Talbot, aye.
Marlena Beatty, yes. Aye. 3-0. Erica? We're losing commissioners. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, the last policy is Policy 26, CDL, alcohol and drug testing. This policy we've had in place. We went back to review it. At the end of the day, it has served its purpose and will continue to serve its purpose. We don't have any changes to recommend to it. So we basically, the recommendation is that we keep it in place and we make no changes except for some small formatting revisions. So content-wise, no change.
My only question is, didn't we review this one less than a year ago? And don't we do these on a rolling basis of?
We do, every 3 years, we're supposed to go through all of them.
So the difference with this one, you're talking about the other, there's like a drug-free workplace policy, I think it's policy 6, so we did that one. This one actually gets done with union negotiations and goes into the union contracts.
You know it all, Erica. Thank you. She knows how I'm confused. She knows.
You ready?
Yes, would you read the motion, Phil?
Move the RMLD Board of Commissioners approve policy 26, CDL alcohol and drug testing revision 1 with no changes. Should that say except for formatting changes?
We probably should say that.
Yeah,
Except for
let's
minor,
add except for formatting, except for minor
formatting change. That's
No changes except for minor formatting changes.
As
writing.
presented. On the recommendation of the general manager.
Can we say formatting revisions?
Thank you for the second, Dave.
Except for minor formatting changes.
You're seconding the modification to say except for
We say formatting revisions?
formatting
Yeah,
revisions.
that's all good.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
That sounds relatively uncontroversial. Depends how far you can get in the paragraph.
Well, now that you brought it up.
Good one, Dave.
Well, no, every once in a while.
All right, all those in favor?
Ms. Pacino, aye?
Why do we, oh, aye,
Why what?
aye.
No, just say your question, then we'll vote. Yes, you are in favor, but were you gonna, you said why do we?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, why do we even have to do this if we're just saying it's so good because it expired? Is that it?
We got a policy to review them every 3 years.
Well, the policy is to review it every 3 years, so it was reviewed.
And we,
Okay, that explains it. So, I mean, it stays in force even if we didn't do this, right? So,
correct.
anyway, aye.
Correct.
That is my last and final word. Aye.
Marlena Beta, yes. Passes 3-0.
Yep.
And we're at the end now for scheduling. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, December 14th at 6. But Erica, I'm going to ask you to include that in your email to Steve, because I know only 4 of the 5 commissioners can attend that meeting.
Right now, yep.
So now we'll try to make it so that all 5 of us can possibly attend. We might as well group it in with that email. Yep, okay. Other than that, we are scheduled to meet Thursday, January 19th at 7:30, Wednesday, February 15th at 7:30, Thursday, March 16th at 7:30, Thursday, April 20th at 7:30, Thursday, May 18th at 7:30, and Thursday, June 15th at 7:30. I don't think we're gonna schedule past
I cannot be here for the
that.
January 19th meeting. I cannot be here. I got a client scheduled that I have to go to, out of state.
You'll be out of town.
I'll be out of state.
Okay. And I don't think we're going to try to schedule past June right now. It's just too far out.
It's okay.
Okay? And
Great.
yeah. Other than that, and I'll just, well, could you remind Bob that he's on the warrant schedule?
Yeah.
For December, and I guess the cab, when's the next cab meeting?
I knew you were going to ask me. I should have pulled that up.
Only because Bob Coulter's, and I'm wondering if he can't.
December 14th sounds familiar, but hold on a second.
If it is, he probably definitely
I think
can't do it.
it's the 7th, or
Dave Talbot, you're covering accounts payable
Eighth.
in December, and John jumped off, but he's covering
December
payroll.
8th is our next CAB meeting.
At 6 p.m.
Sounds good.
Okay. So without any further items on the agenda, I'll move that we adjourn.
Move that the Board of Commissioners adjourn regular session. That's
Second. All those in favor?
Ms. Pacino, aye?
No, Talbot, aye.
Marlene Avita, aye. 3-0, Erica. All right, thank you for attending. Joe and Ben. and
thank
Ken.
you.